It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kim Hammer Show. Glad to have you join us either via 101.1 FM The Answer or on our Facebook Live. We will have the Surgeon General in here after a little bit. He is getting an update at the Health Department now, and as soon as he gets that done and breaks free, he will come over here to the station. We'll just have to work on his schedule. Hopefully he can get done with that and get over here, which will give us the most accurate, up-to-date information that we can give you regarding the handling of the coronavirus here in the state of Arkansas. Just a couple things before we get into our show with our guests today. Want to thank our sponsor, Edwards Food Store. I was in Edwards this morning. Their shelves were stocked. They actually had toilet paper, water, all the other things that people are going crazy over. One of the things that you want to know about Edwards Food Store, too, is that you can order online. And that's one thing I think that has really picked up in the last week or two is the fact that people are doing more ordering online. So expect a little bit longer wait when you go. But Edwards Food Store in Central Arkansas over in East Arkansas, they can take care of all your needs. Their stores shelves were fully stocked this morning, so it's a great place to go, and the prices are very competitive. Everett GMC down in Saline County there at Alcoa and I-30, they are still selling cars. They still had salesmen on the lot. Their service department's still open and business as usual down there. So you can go down and get a great deal from Dwight and Susie and their staff at Everett GMC there on I-30 at Alcoa Road in Saline County. Duck's Garage, they're still working on cars, trucks, diesel, fleets. If you have any automotive needs, go down there and see Duck down at Duck's Garage on Airlane Drive in Benton. They'll take really good care of you. They are a family-owned and operated business. And, in fact, all my sponsors are family-owned and operated. They are the best because you get that personal effect of somebody that lives in your community, understands your community, and it's not a big corporate world where they make decisions and don't really care what you think as long as you give them their money. And then the fourth one is Baxley Phillips Mowdy. They're still selling real estate. If you have a commercial, residential, or you are looking for rental property, either residential or commercial, give the folks down at Baxley Phillips Mowdy a call down there at Spring Hill and Highway 5 in Saline County. They'll take really good care of you. And if you are a business and you'd like to advertise on this show, as long as you meet the criteria, I'd be glad to talk to you about that. You can just send an email to the Kim Hammer Show at gmail.com, the Kim Hammer Show at gmail.com, and we will get you taken care of. Before we go to our guest today, which is Charles Waddell, I want to recognize Benjamin Bowers over here. You see him each and every week. If you have a question, you can send it in to our Facebook page or message, and we'll be glad to get that. But I want to recognize and congratulate Benjamin. He's been trying to get into law school for the last year, and he was accepted at the law school at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. And so he's been working real hard at that, and I want to congratulate him because he is a success story. That's why he's on the show. He's a success story, and he has made a major accomplishment in being accepted. Bowen Law School, you guys missed out. That's all I got to say. This guy's going to have to go to Fayetteville because you guys missed a really good candidate. Too bad you're lost, but going to the University of Arkansas for a law degree. Today in studio, we have Charles Waddell. Let me just read to you about my guest today. And when the Surgeon General is able to get here, he's gracious enough where he's going to yield a little of his time. We'll get him back on because we're going to have more when we talk about today. But let me just go over his resume for you a little bit. He served in the U.S. Navy for 8 years, submarine service. That makes you special right there.
Absolutely.
Not anybody can do submarine service. Qualified on 3 different subs, ship's diver, mate second class, Armed Force Police Detachment, Tacoma, Washington. He's a police officer, former police officer. And if you're watching Facebook Live, this guy is 72. He does not look 72, but he is. But he's a former police officer on Tacoma Police Department, community liaison officer, National Association of Police Community Officers. He's been the director of Early Childhood Development Center in Tacoma, Washington. Aren't you glad you're not living in Washington with the outbreak of the coronavirus right now?
Right now.
You're in the right place, brother. For the Pierce County Sheriff. and you were on shift whenever it transitioned from state over to a provider.
Right.
So he was there during the transitional time. The Arkansas Division of Youth Services in the past, State Youth Coordinator, Arkansas Workforce Investment Board, Security Administrator for Pulaski Bank, Child and Youth Program Coordinator for the Arkansas Army National Guard, Suicide Prevention Program Manager for Arkansas Army National Guard, and one of the crowns that's going to be, one of the jewels that's going to be in your crown, he is an ordained elder with the Church of God in Christ. And so it's my special pleasure to have on the show today Charles Waddell. Charles, first of all, if you don't mind, I've kind of given them the established that you come with some heavy metal there on your uniform. Tell a little bit about your life personally, if you will, maybe a little bit about your family that you're willing to share, and just kind of get people comfortable with you.
Sure. I was born and raised here in Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. 5 kids. My father was a hardworking individual. My mother was a beautician. Was raised up in the church. So I've got a pretty solid, strong background.
The one thing I wanted to visit with you about is with regards to because you've got a long and lengthy history of working with youth, but also you got a long and lengthy history of law enforcement and seeing it from both sides, the church side and the street side, if you would.
Correct.
And one of the things I wanted to have you on the show to talk about today was about the state of mental health. And we're going to kind of focus on the kids today because that's kind of where your background is with your experience. I guess the burning question I want to ask you is, we as a state, we've been in budget hearings for the last 2 weeks. And incidentally, while I'm thinking about it, according to the information that's on the state website, a lot of our meetings are canceled next week at the Capitol. So if you're thinking about coming up to the Capitol for a meeting next week, now my understanding it's open to the public, but the meetings have been canceled. So just make sure you operate on current information if you plan on coming to the Capitol next week for a meeting. But one of the things we've been covering in the budget hearings, and it was kind of a focus point, was about the amount of money that we spend dealing with mental health. And should we increase the budget when it comes to dealing to mental health? I guess my question is, I want to focus on the youth side starting off, is do you think that our kids today are as mentally stable as kids were in the era that you grew up in and the one that I grew up in? And if not, why do you think we're not, or why do you think they're not?
I think there are some issues there when it comes to the resilience of youth today. One of my first thoughts is that our youth maybe not or are not heard as well as we were. I operate from what we call a youth developmental strategy for many years after the Boys and Girls Clubs, and it created a sense of added value for our youth. The first part of it was creating a sense of belonging, and that our community seemed to have a problem with that because the gangs got it right. It is unconditional to care for our children and to do the things necessary for them to grow, to develop, and to heal. The second thing is to create a sense of usefulness, finding their places in our society, in our communities, rather than putting them on hold until we get them to an acceptable age. Learning how to incorporate our youth in the sense of community, the sense of being able to provide a resource, and being able to ask them to be a part of something before they determine that they are not a part of our community or a part of the lifestyles that we have. The third one was create a sense of competence. I learned something in a 1 Minute Manager that says that we look for an opportunity to find someone doing something right. Well, when it comes to our youth, we look at them, how can we help them to be able to find themselves being that much more competent by taking the time, teaching, working with them, and creating opportunities for them to be able to recognize that they have knowledge, that they have value. And that's really important to them because that added value is something that they're willing not to give up once we have taken that opportunity to provide it to them. And lastly is the one I think is most important, is creating a sense of influence. We listen to what they say. We then demonstrate by creating activities and events that are reflective of what they have said. We incorporate them in the decision making and the validating those things that we're putting before them. Um, when we don't do that, we're not allowing them to be able to demonstrate their levels of ability, acquired ability, and the opportunity for them to be able to excel, regardless of what others have said. That there's an authoritative group community that says that you're valuable. And when you do that, then they're able to come back to you when they start having problems, that you've created those trust levels. Today's time, you find our children doing somewhat like we're doing. We're trying to survive on our own because our trust factors are not there. And then oftentimes I hear, you don't understand. But there's no follow up. And I may not understand, but I'm willing to understand. I'm willing to take the time to understand. And realizing that value systems that they have today are much more challenging than the ones that we had. And we end up having to help them to mitigate the circumstances that they have. I find that when we're talking about children at rates of suicide, is that because they have not created the sense of hopelessness, or we have not given them opportunity to have a sense of hopefulness because we don't want to take the time. We don't want to hear. We devalue what they're really telling us. And sometimes what they're telling us doesn't seem to be real. But the reality is that it is real to them.
So let me interrupt you and ask something, because you said something just a second ago, kind of starting your thoughts. I think I heard you say the gangs got it right.
They did.
And so all the points that you've been mentioning, are those built into the mentality, the structure of a gang, as far as providing those things for those that want to join to the gang or those that are brought into the gang?
If you look at those elements from an illicit perspective, absolutely.
And so where did we get it wrong, or where did we as a society get it wrong and jump off track? That, because from my perspective, when you hear that, some are wanting to put more money into the system in order to be able to provide, to expand our mental health services. When you look at the older generation, let's just say the 30s and up, dealing with incarceration rate, now the look at the judicial system, and should we be, instead of arresting people so much, should we be looking at maybe what's causing their issues, more of a mental health? Somewhere the train jumped the track, and it seems like it can't get back on the track going in the right direction. In your opinion, because you got a long, lengthy resume there that you've seen a lot of things, where would you say that it jumped the track, and what would you say we need to do to get it back on?
I think it's jumped the track when we began to start trying to solve the problem rather than prevent the problem. We're addressing signs and symptoms rather than causes. I remember back in the 80s when I was with the police department and I was the National Police Community Liaison Regional Representative. We had a situation, a conference in Seattle called And Justice for All. And we actually looked at the discrepancies in the law enforcement in terms of arrest, court, how those procedures were. And there were 17 recommendations that went forward that talked about being able to level the playing field. Some of those things were understanding what are some of the things that caused folks to create or elicit behavior. And one of those things we used to call was a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you tell people what they're not, and you're in a position that they see as authoritative, oftentimes they gravitate to being just that. Rather than us pointing out to them, that self-fulfilling prophecy, if I project to you how much value you have and what is important to you, then that becomes something that they ascribe to. Another one was called opportunity and strain theory. Opportunity and strain theory said that there were times that people had great desires to have the same things that other people that were much more affluent than they were, but did not have opportunity in terms of jobs or those kinds of things. And rather than give up the idea of having those things, they took illicit behavior to accomplish that. So when we're looking at prevention, we end up having to look some real simple things. What are we telling our children? What are we doing to cause them to have added value? What opportunities are we providing to be able to achieve the goals that are in their minds and their hearts? Are we communicating to them the things that are just as important to them as they are to us. So we're looking at that in terms of the preventative standpoint, is that we end up having to be a little bit more patient. We have to listen. We have to understand from their perspective, and we have to be prepared to help.
Okay. Let's hit the pause button on this conversation a minute, because we've had join us now in studio Dr. Greg Bledsoe, who is the Surgeon General for the state of Arkansas. Part of the opportunity for him to be here is because of our sponsor, Edwards Food Store, Everett GMC Buick, and Duck's Garage down in Benton, and Baxley Phillips Mouty down in Saline County. So we appreciate all those individuals that help make this show possible. As a result of that, we're able to have in studio Dr. Greg Bledsoe, our Arkansas Surgeon General. Welcome to the studio.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming, because I know you were being pulled in many directions.
Yes,
One
sir.
thing I want to get established on the front end, your job and what you do is not the only thing you do,
That's correct.
because you actually keep hours in the ER still.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so one thing I want to establish to people is when you hear the term Surgeon General, you think it's some doctor sitting up some cushy office somewhere. In reality, one thing I know about Dr. Bledsoe is he's out in the trenches. He's
That's
out
right.
on the front line. So do you work in the ER as well, or what is it that you do?
Yes, sir. My background is emergency medicine, and I grew up in Arkansas, but I did global health for 5 years through Johns Hopkins, and then eventually came back to become the Surgeon General of Arkansas with Governor Hutchinson. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm a clinical physician. I work in the emergency department. I see patients. This past week, I did 4 night shifts, and then I flipped around and did a day shift on Thursday, which is why I wasn't at the press conference with the governor on Thursday, because I was seeing patients. But I think that gives me an advantage, because I'm not reading textbooks up in an ivory tower. I'm actually putting my hands on patients, and I'm hearing from other clinicians who are in the field dealing with this coronavirus issue. And I'm concerned, because I'm one of the people who's on the front line, in addition to being a health policy person with the governor's office.
And that's one thing I wanted the audience to understand, is that you're not, like I said, sitting up in some ivory tower. You're
Yes,
right
sir.
there in the middle of it all, dealing with it. And
That's right.
what's important is, because I hear from my practitioners back home, and you got to find that balance about how real of an emergency is this? Is
That's right.
it political, or is it whipped up, or
That's
what's
right.
the balance? So I know you just came from a meeting at the health department.
Right.
Can you share with us what the most current information is?
Well, I can tell you that at 1:30, the governor's going to have a press conference at the health department with Secretary of Health Nate Smith, and he's going to be giving some updates on the number of positives and that sort of thing. But what I want to communicate with your listeners is that I think there's 2 aspects of the anxiety that people are having now. One is the anxiety related to the virus itself. How do I get it? What's going to happen if I get it? Who's at risk? But the other aspect of the anxiety that I feel like people are experiencing is that they are concerned that the people who are making decisions, maybe aren't as coordinated as they want, or that there's not enough activity, or they're just concerned about the response itself. I just want the listeners in Arkansas to know this, is that we have exceptional executive leadership from Governor Hutchinson. And from day number 1, he has been on top of this. I just came from the health department. It's a Saturday. Everyone knows government workers aren't typically in the office on Saturday, but I can tell you that in the basement of the health department, there's something called the Emergency Operations Center, and it looks like a war room. There's all these cubicles and computers and data screens on the wall, and conference rooms, and that place is packed right now. So there are people who are decision makers for the health department, infectious disease experts, members of the governor's office, who are down there in real time talking about these issues and coordinating the response. In addition to that, this morning I got a call from Senator Cotton, and we had a discussion. His office is very engaged. I know that Senator Bozeman's office has been very engaged, as well as our other federal leaders. So I just want the people of Arkansas to know that on both the state level and the national level, the individuals who are tasked with representing and protecting us and voicing the concerns of the state to our government officials, they're involved. They're very active on this, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen with the coronavirus in Arkansas, but we've got all hands on deck right now in the state.
I hear a lot of things, as do everybody. In times like this, you're just hearing a lot of churn out there. I would say this, regardless of however this turns out, one of the positive things is, if nothing else, it has certainly given us a pattern, a template
Absolutely.
for something else that may come down the road
That's absolutely
worse.
right.
I think about the terrorist, and I mean, what if there was a chemical attack such as that? Certainly, this administration and those that are in this generation of leadership at any level, whether it's legislatively or government or you, will certainly have a template to look back that
right.
we can hit the ground running even quicker than what have been able to do today.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that was really encouraging to me when I saw President Trump's press conference yesterday is you had the government standing up and saying, this is important. We're declaring this an emergency. We're going to release resources to help attack this. And then alongside President Trump were all these healthcare CEOs saying, we are committed to fighting this. We're going to release our private sector resources. We're going to focus on this. And that's the way it should be. We shouldn't be dependent on government. We shouldn't be expecting government to solve all our problems, but government can be a great facilitator of a response and link arms with the private sector. And I tell you what, seeing those whatever you want to call them, the titans of industry or whatever, linking arms with President Trump and the others gave me great encouragement. And I thought that's the way we should be doing it. We should be attacking this full force. And God bless America for linking arms and addressing this collectively together.
One of the things I saw from one of the private sector, I'm not sure, I think it was somebody with one of the labs, and it seems like there's a spirit of cooperation among the competitors as far as the race to get the cure, not so much so that they can have the corner on the market as much as we can address the need both here and around the world. That's
absolutely right. And when you looked at the CEOs yesterday that President Trump had, you have Target and Walmart, you have CVS and Walgreens, you have competitive organizations and companies. And they're saying, look, we're going to put the competition aside. We got to solve this problem for the American people and the world. And that's exactly what they should be doing.
Okay. So do you mind taking a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay. Why the 200 number? I know you got to land at a number somewhere, but the governor sent out a directive, which incidentally for my listeners, we're rescheduling out of respect for the governor's directive, asking that groups of no more than 200.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so why 200? Why not 150? Why not 500? What's the magic in the 200?
I don't think there is magic in it. I think it's a bit arbitrary, but it's sort of been the standard request when we have incidents like this. If you have 199 or you have 210, that's not the big deal. It just sort of gives an approximate size of the crowd. That above that, you start getting into numbers where it could, potentially significantly increase the spread of this. So there's no magic in the number 200. The point is to try to reduce the size of the crowds you're with and limit the spread of this.
Okay. And I'm just telling you some things that
yes,
have come to me. So, I was in a restaurant last night, and there was obviously 200 or more people.
Right.
I drove by the mall a while ago. Everybody's looking for some place to go.
Right.
And there's that battle of government being intrusive over into private sector, over into churches, asking them what to do and everything, is part of the rationale that the more we can do to try to get cooperation to bring the numbers down as far as the large gatherings, the less the potential for the spread. So this is more of spirit of cooperation.
That's absolutely right. And if you looked at the press conference yesterday that the governor did, he was asked by the media, why aren't you saying more about closing churches or closing this or closing that? And he said, well, look, that's really not my role. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, that's not my role. I'm here to basically ask the private sector to make wise decisions. And that's what we're asking people. Closing things down, limiting travel, all that stuff, that's not an easy decision. I mean, you're talking about, think about the NBA shutting down. I mean, the millionaires and the billionaires are going to be fine, but the little people who are associated with those organizations, they're not going to be getting a paycheck unless someone intervenes. And so when you limit things and when you say we're going to stop this and stop that, the flip side of that is that, that causes turmoil for people. So you have to be very careful and measured. But we're just asking people to make wise decisions and try to limit the spread of this virus.
Have you got a few minutes you can stick around
yes,
for a
sir.
second?
I'm here.
Okay. So we're going to take a break here at the bottom of the hour so you can catch up on the national news. We'll be back after just 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to try to shorten the breakdown and be able to get back as quick as we can. We want to be respectful. We have on the show today Charles Waddell, and we're going to pick back up because we're going to lead into people's mental ability to handle the crisis and how they're responding. And then we have Dr. Greg Bledsoe, Arkansas Surgeon General, and going to continue to give us update on the coronavirus. And we'll welcome you back on the Kim Hammer Show after the break.
A MeTV Entertainment Quiz.
What is the most memorable TV show on MeTV? Is it MASH, The Brady Bunch, Carol Burnett, Perry Mason, Gilligan's Island, The Andy Griffith Show? The answer is yes. They're all memorable entertainment.
Watch all these and more on MeTV.
Watch KMYA, MeTV, Little Rock's home for memorable entertainment television. For program schedule and times, log on to littlerockmetv.com.
If you simply take your Social Security benefits at face value, you could leave tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. Hey, it's David Lucas. Get this, as much as $10 billion in Social Security benefits go unclaimed every single year. Learn how to wring every nickel out of your Social Security benefits that are rightfully yours on The David Lucas Show this Saturday at 10 a.m. right here
on 101.1 FM, The Answer.
We always hear that elections have consequences. When Democrats took over the House, it led to the impeachment of an elected president. This radio station wants every listener to focus on what's important. How do we save America from the forces that want to tear it apart? How do we make sure we save America for our kids and our grandkids? The hosts on this station need you to engage in the fight. We need you to register to vote. Elections have consequences. Make sure you are part of the solution. 101.1 FM. The Answer. Most of us didn't see this coming. In fact, we've been stunned as we watch it unfold. America's young people have become so indoctrinated that more than half of them now think socialism is a good idea. How did this happen? We weren't paying attention while the nation's schools taught this confounding ideology to our kids. Now those kids are adults. Now they want to fundamentally change the way America works. This radio station exists to educate and to return this country to the way it was founded. We have a country to save. Keep listening to find out how. 101.1 FM. The Answer.
The Rush Limbaugh radio program. Great info and great listeners.
Hey, Rush. The only thing that's infectious is your passion to push against this madness. We know that the number one battlefield is that of the mind, and we cannot afford to cede any more rational, common sense ground to the madness of the left.
Be sure to check in and give us a call.
The Rush Limbaugh Show, weekdays at 11, right before the Sean Hannity Show on 101.1 FM. The Answer.
Okay. Well, he's got a glitch. We're going to be another minute, but that's that's the message I want to get out. So that because a lot of the lay people, they're having trouble. Okay. All right. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Glad to have you back. We have in studio Dr. Greg Bledsoe, who is the Arkansas Surgeon General, and also have my guest Charles Waddell, which will be coming back to that conversation. And we're going to lead right into you, Charles, after Dr. Bledsoe gets done regarding the mental state of people being able to handle a crisis like this, because I think that's an important aspect that I'm not so sure that people are as geared up today if this as they were 20, 30 years ago. It just seems to be a different reaction today than there was then. So, Dr. Bledsoe, let's get in. I'm going to give you a scenario and help me understand and the listening audience understand something. So I'm an individual. I don't get the flu shot. Mm-hmm. I go out and I get the flu, which incidentally, I got the flu shot and I got the flu. Yeah. And I got pneumonia after that. Mm-hmm. Okay. But for those that maybe don't get the flu shot and they have their symptoms, and then somebody gets the COVID-19, of which there is no vaccine for it right now. So, you know, if you're unlucky enough to get it, you're going to have some symptoms. I guess what I want you to explain and help me understand is what's the difference? Because I heard, you know, if you're 80 and above or you've got respiratory, you know, illnesses and stuff, the COVID-19 virus can be very detrimental to you. That's why the nursing homes are shut down and restrictions are put in place as far as being able to get in and out of the nursing home. We want to protect that population. Right. But what's the difference in the symptoms between just the general flu and the COVID-19? And will a person recover from COVID-19 the same way they will recover from the flu if they didn't get the shot?
That's a great question, and I've gotten this question a lot as well. So it's a different virus than the flu. So a couple of things to know. Number one, the COVID-19, as it moves in, it's coming into an immunologically naive population. No one has any immunity to this. So as it comes in, we know that the coronaviruses as a family are very easily transmitted. It's like it's from the same family as the common cold. So think about how transmissible the common cold is. That's how transmissible COVID-19 is. It's highly transmissible, highly contagious. And as this highly contagious virus moves into the population, what we're finding is that those over the age of 55, especially if they have chronic diseases like uncontrolled diabetes, prior lung disease, heart disease, things like that, they're very susceptible to this virus. And what it does is it causes on both sides of your lungs bilateral, something called interstitial pneumonia, which is a generalized inflammation of the lungs, and it decreases your ability to process oxygen. And so what they're seeing in places like Italy and other places is that you get a big upsurge of patients into the emergency department, which then a certain percentage of those have severe respiratory distress. They get sent to the ICUs. And after a few days of this, you're having a saturation of the ICUs and the emergency department, coupled with, because this is highly transmissible, it jumps into the healthcare providers. And so at the very time you're having the increased volume of patients coming into the hospital, you're having a decrease of the number of workers who can take care of those patients because the workers are getting sick. So that's something to keep an eye on here in Arkansas, is not just the numbers, but the number of people who are infected, who test positive, who are healthcare workers. And that's one of the concerning things. Long term, no one knows exactly, but the reports coming out of some of these places is that it causes significant long-term effects to lung function, but only time will tell what percentage of patients have that.
So the COVID-19 notice in Washington State, the last map, Washington State, the Northeast, they seem to be inundated.
That's right.
Is this what you're learning from their experience as far as what you just said? And
right.
What are you basing it on?
You know, one good thing about being here in Arkansas is that we haven't had to deal with this on the front end. We're watching these other locations. So we've watched China, then Europe, and now we're watching both coasts of the U.S., and we're learning from this. So that's a good thing. But the thing that's concerning for people who are in my position, not only as the Surgeon General, but as an emergency physician who's going to be taking care of these patients, is that in every place that we're seeing the number of these patients spike, what we're seeing is a significant increase in the burden on our emergency departments and intensive care units. And so we're going to basically disaster sort of protocols and trying to deal with this influx of patients. And it's going to be really interesting to see as this continues, the adjustments that we're going to need to make.
So why is the flu, which the number of deaths that are recorded through the flu, why is the flu not given the same level of urgency as we hit the flu season every year that we are now giving to the COVID-19?
Well, we have some native resistance to the flu virus because we get it every year. We have a vaccine that helps with that. But then also the seasonal flu has a fatality rate of about 0.1%. So low. It is causing deaths, but it's usually in people who are severely immunocompromised or elderly, which is why we tell older people to make sure you get the flu shot. What COVID-19 is doing is, number one, it has a case fatality rate somewhere around 10 times as much as the seasonal flu. So that's a problem. And number two, not only is it attacking people over the age of 55, but it's also it's highly contagious, and it's infecting large percentages of the healthcare workers who are trying to take care of these patients. And so
$10 billion.
What we're finding is that the only way to significantly slow this down is to implement the social distancing protocols that we're seeing on both the national and state level.
Okay, we got cut off there for a second. So speaking of the social distancing, and, we talked about the 200, I know, some of the mega churches, are addressing that, trying to implement some practical. I know the schools, which were the four central Arkansas counties, 4 or 5, they've been, asked to dismiss school for, I guess we're going to revisit it. March 30th is when it'll come back up for a revisit. Is that 2-week cycle, or what's the cycle that you hope to see implemented that it would break the spread of it, or what's the rationale behind the length of time that you would want to see some of the down activity like we're seeing now?
Well, we're hoping that the social distancing for the next 2 weeks gives us hope that it won't be spread at an increased speed. And while we implement the social distancing, we're monitoring the number of positive cases. My personal opinion is that we're going to continue to see a rise in the positive cases. But the hope is that as we're testing and as we're getting this increased rise, we're also decreasing the rate of transmission. And in 2 weeks, we'll have a better assessment of where we are as a state. If it looks like it's continuing to spread and get worse, those social distancing recommendations will probably be continued. But the hope is that at some point we'll start seeing a decrease in the number of cases, and at that point you'll see a gradual lessening of the social distancing and things will get back to normal. But no one knows exactly how long this is going to take, and I think our leaders have done a good job of saying it's better safe than sorry. Let's protect the population at the front end, and then let's assess as we go.
All right, and you hear all sorts of things about what can stop it and everything.
Right.
With regard, somebody had said something about the warmer temperatures as it gets warmer.
Right.
Is this a virus that reacts to the temperatures as they increase? Because over the next 3 weeks, we should see hopefully temperatures going up in sunny days.
That's something that's being discussed at length. I hope so. My hope is that it will be, but there's no way of knowing for sure. So the experts that you talk to are split on this. Some are saying that yes, they think there's the potential that it'll be slowed, or others are saying no, they think that it won't be. My hope is that it will. But time will tell. And I'm hoping that as people get outside and aren't cooped up and the temperatures start to rise, the virus will start to dissipate some, but there's no way of knowing for sure.
Okay. So what else would you want to share with the listening audience that you think would be important for them to know?
I think two things. One thing is that this is not this is an unprecedented sort of situation, and it's a real crisis. I mean, this isn't manufactured. I appreciated President Trump doing what he did yesterday and declaring a national emergency and getting the private sector involved. But this is not a fake thing. This is a real thing, number one. But on the flip side of that, once the public understands that this is real, the other thing that I would ask them to do is not to panic. So there are two extremes. One is to say, it's no big deal. And the other is to say, oh my gosh, I can't sleep at night because I'm so afraid. Both of those extremes I don't think are productive. What we need to do is be measured in our response, recognize the threat, and then say to ourselves, okay, I'm going to do what I can do to limit my social interactions, to continue washing my hands, to try to prevent the spread of this disease, to stay away from clinics and hospitals and emergency departments unless I need them because I'm starting to deteriorate physically, and to be wise and discerning in how I approach this. But I'm not going to give in to fear. I'm not going to give in to panic. One of the things, I'm a Christian, and one of the things I've been really encouraged about, when you flip through the Bible, there's so many things, there are commands in the scripture that say, do not fear. It's not a request, it's a command. Do not fear. And so my message to the people of Arkansas is, listen to that command. It's a command. Don't be afraid. Be measured, be discerning, be wise, be prepared, but don't be panicked and don't be afraid.
Well, you segued right back into Charles's portion, because when you leave, that's what we're going to get into.
Great. So, that's what we need to hear.
We got the power of the Spirit at 101.1 FM on the Kim Hammer Show today. Let me tell you, and to that point, I think that's the benefit, and I will give Governor Hutchinson recognition for one thing. The chains of communication have been very open to the public with the regular press conferences and doing everything for those that want to be informed.
Right.
Unfortunately, some people would rather feed off fear,
right,
and that's what they're used to. That's what they're comfortable. That's what gives them social media access and all that kind of stuff. The good thing, and y'all pass down in leadership positions like you and the governor and others that are working with him, y'all pass out information, but I think the benefit of something like this dialogue here is it gives a little bit of reasoning and understanding behind why the decisions are being made. Because when y'all make decisions, what people want to know is, well, what went into that decision? What's the down in the weeds aspect and understanding for why you did it? So I appreciate very much you coming on the show and sharing with us some information. Now, if you can answer this, and it's going to be the last question, because one thing I do, well, two things. The governor sent out a directive asking that the general population stay at 200 or less. And I know there's been, some pushback on that, and it's caused some great inconveniences. And actually, it's going to cause some financial distress
Right.
on some people for events that they had planned and it canceled. With regards to what the Bible says, this is what I'd say about that. You know, the Bible does teach us to be submissive to those who are in authority over you. The Bible also teaches, you know, that to pray for those that, you know, are in position.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why you vote for people that you want to know in a situation like this. Calmer heads will prevail, and eventually it will work out. So I just want to throw that spiritual side on things. That
You're
I know the
absolutely
governor's
right.
in a difficult position, but
That's right. It's hard to make decisions. I mean, we all recognize these are inconveniences. We all recognize that there's a significant sacrifice that goes into abiding by the social distancing. And it was not an easy decision. I applaud Governor Hutchinson for making a difficult decision. He's listening to experts. He's getting feedback from people. He's not doing this in a vacuum. And so I appreciate that. But to your point, you know, we covet the prayers of the people of Arkansas, you know, and that's just not me. I mean, I know Secretary of Health Nate Smith appreciates that. I know Governor Hutchinson appreciates that. So we're in this together, and we are recognizing the sacrifice that people are making. We're very appreciative. Thank you for holding us up in prayer, and thank you for thinking of us in this difficult time.
Well, you've got a very big job, and you've given very good answers, but I'm going to ask you, because I think in the midst of times like this, you still have to keep your sense of humor. You'll go crazy. If you can answer this question, you really are smart. What's the deal with the toilet paper? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's just people are thinking about, if I can't get to the store for the next 2 weeks, what will I need? And toilet paper's at the top of the list. So I don't know any other reason for that. But I think it's just one of those impulse items that people buy when they you know, feel concerned.
So there's no rational reason
No,
for why
none
toilet
that I
paper
know
should
of.
be flying. I was in the store this morning. I promise that truck hit that back door, and there were people that, I mean, they couldn't get it out of the box fast enough.
That's crazy.
And I'm thinking, but one of my friends did tell me, that's in kind of the supply line. He said, "Don't worry, there's plenty out there."
Yeah.
And all these people that have bought it up for the last week for a year's worth of supply.
Yeah.
That's the last thing will be on their list for the next year. So,
That's right.
All right. Any final words?
No, just thank you for having me on the radio show. Thanks to the people of Arkansas for being supportive of those of us who are trying to make wise decisions. And please continue to do the social distancing. But we're going to communicate with the people of Arkansas transparently and let them know what's going on. But we appreciate you guys.
All right, one last thing.
Yes,
Give
sir.
us the most accurate place that people can go to get accurate information about the COVID-19 and where they know it's going to be factual information.
Sure. So I would say the CDC website, they have a link on coronavirus. That's on a national level. The Department of Health has a link on their website that also has the total counts of positive cases and negative cases, that sort of thing. But the last thing is that I'm on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is GH Bledsoe. So just like my name, GHBLEDSOE. And I'm going to start giving, I've done it the last 2 nights. I'm going to continue to give updates each day to the people of Arkansas about what's going on in our state regarding the coronavirus, so they can follow me and get those real-time updates.
Okay. All right. That is Dr. Greg Bledsoe, our Arkansas Surgeon General, who's been in today to give us an update about the COVID-19 virus. We appreciate the time. I know you're busy. I know you got to get back to things, so we appreciate you being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. All right. So, Charles.
Yes.
Give me some perspective, and if you want to weigh in this, Dr. Bledsoe, I know you're leaving, but if you want to, that's fine. If you don't, why are people not able to handle situations like this today the way they were back in your generation, my generation, and handle it with a little bit more level playing field as far as how they deal with it?
One of the first things that comes to mind is basically right what the doctor was saying. We have embraced a culture of fear, and it says false evidence appearing real. We don't even take the time to look at it to see whether or not it's right or not, but we embrace it because we've heard it. From my day and time, I got my strengths, my resilience from a number of people. First was my father, who was a hardworking man, didn't say a whole lot. We didn't get a chance to talk a lot, but I saw an image of a person who made a commitment when it was really tough. So I learned how to deal with tough times that way. Then I had a teacher who saw something in me and decided that they were going to work with me after school, not worried about whether or not they were going to get have time to do it, but they saw that it was worth the investment. Then into a spiritual life. There's some things that I learned in my spiritual life. And as you go back to the Bible, said God did not give us the spirit of fear. And look at the sequence of power, love, and a sound mind. So we're not really going along the lines of what we have actually been taught. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have a sense of arrival, that I don't have time to deal with somebody else's problems. I'm just trying to enjoy the blessing that I've gotten so far. And as a result of that, our children are suffering, communities are suffering, families are suffering, because we're not recognizing that they also have problems. And we're not supporting them in the process of developing resilience, basically realizing that stuff happens, but then the next thing is, how do we deal with that so that we can have the best outcome that is possible under the circumstances, rather than accepting the fact that we're doomed and taking measures out of hopelessness that when that's not the case. I've been challenged by scripture that I've been brought up in my ministry, and that's in Luke, the 4th chapter. It says, "And the Spirit of the Lord has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to heal the brokenhearted, to set the captive free, to restore sight to the blind, and to restore sight to the blind, and then to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." We as a communities, Christian communities, have a commitment, have a commission to be able to address those that are hurting. And rather than being in a position of observation, to be in the trenches with them to address those needs. And when people get to the place of hopelessness, what they're saying is that I have not been able to find an answer, and I'm going through an awful lot. I share with you, as a police officer, at one point, I got a call out of the station, my first call on Father's Day, about 3:30 in the afternoon on a bridge, suspicious person. And I got to the bridge and didn't see anyone. And then I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was a person in white coming from under the bridge and came to the middle of the bridge. I turned around and went back to the bridge, and it was a 43-year-old woman that was standing on the edge of the bridge. And I couldn't get around to her, but I talked to her for 8 minutes. And in that 8 minutes, she had expressed the fact that she'd been on that bridge 4 Fridays in a row. And this was the 5th Friday she was there, and then Sunday, she had made a decision. What she shared with me was a lot of pain, circumstances, to the place to where she had gotten to a place that she felt that there was no way out. And Monday was coming, and she was going to have one more event, and she decided she couldn't take it. Out of all of our conversation, it got to the place that she was open to reconsider, but then she said Monday. And Monday, I got to go to court, and I'm going to lose my license. And at that point, she stepped out into space and committed suicide. And I asked God, I said, you said that all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, and to them I'm called according to your purpose. And I did not understand. And I asked him to give me an understanding. For 2 years, I labored with that, and every time I talked about it, I broke down, until my father said to me in his hospital bed, because he had been in an explosion out at the arsenal, and he had been burned 60% of his body, 3rd-degree burns. And I told him about it, and I started to cry. And he said to me, son, it's going to be okay. And I came to realize what it took was someone that cared to tell me it was going to be okay. And then I saw the revelation of that about that woman. All she needed was someone that she trusted that was going to say to her, it was going to be okay. And that at that point, they were going to work with her to do something about all of that hopelessness that was there. So I dare say when we look at our children, that we need to start pulling alongside them and start to seek to understand them. I used to facilitate 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And one of the things in it is that we need to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And our children are going through some of the challenges greater than we ever had without the strong foundation that we had, because most of us had challenging lives. And somehow we end up having to bridge that gap and get back to the place to show them, one, that we care. And we invested in them being able to be successful. The other part of that is looking at it from the standpoint of the Christian community is the agape, and my definition from the Greek is that is an unconditional, benevolent concern for mankind. That says that there are no conditions that which I am going to ignore you in your point of need. And that says that we end up having to realize that our future is in the hands of a lot of young people who have potential and perspective that we can have an added value to if we commit to them, and then begin to look back at the issues that have put them in that circumstance. I again say that I'm a preventionalist. So I want to understand, how did we get there? How do we get to the place that our children don't come to us to talk? They can't share with us what the problems are. And us to understand what the problems that they have, to protect them as those that came before us protected us. Some not so good, but at least there was a community there that when our immediate family didn't take care of us, that we had an extended family that did, because our children were the most important asset. So we at this particular point, we have an issue of being able to stabilize the conditions, somewhat similar to what we're doing in looking at this pandemic, is that we end up having to find out what the causes are, who are the victims, how to control it, how to address it, and then go to the other end and look at how do we prevent it again. And realize that the cost at this point should be not an issue.
Because the cost paid in the long run is going to be greater than the cost invested now.
Absolutely.
One of the things I heard, and we're coming down the last 2 minutes in the show, one of the things I heard you say, and I've actually heard it throughout your comments today, is about the presence of a strong father figure in your life. That throughout life you have gone back to that strong father figure for advice or for stability in difficult times in your life. One of the guests I'm going to have on my show in the next few weeks is going to be the group that's Better Dads. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it's a group that's been charged with helping bring about awareness for being a better dad in your family. One thing I'd like to have you back on the show and we'll talk about deeper is about the value of having that strong male presence in the house and how that aligns with what the Bible's description of the family structure is and the benefits that it brings. That it'll take we didn't get where we are today overnight. It's going to take a long time to turn the ship around, but at least we need to make the effort to put it in the right direction.
Absolutely.
All right. So my guest today has been Charles Waddell. Gave you the long, lengthy list of his qualifications. I think through listening to his comments today, he has lived up to his reputation, and look forward to having you back on the show again. Want to say thank you to our sponsors today, which are Edwards Food Store in Central Arkansas and also over in Eastern Arkansas, Everett GMC Buick, Duck's Garage down in Benton, and Baxley Phillips Mowdy down in Saline County. And if you'd like to advertise on this show, as long as you meet the criteria, I'll be glad to talk to you. You can send me an email to the kimhammershow@gmail.com. Actually, it's kimhammershow@gmail.com. Thank you to Dr. Greg Bledsoe, our Arkansas Surgeon General, who came on and gave us an update. The governor is going to speak at 1:30, so encourage you to tune in to that. You've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll have the Department of Higher Ed on next week. Marie
101.1 FM, The Answer. KDXE FM, Kamak Village, Little Rock. A Salem Media Group station. 101.1 FM, The Answer.